Masechet Avoda Zara Daf Ayin Daled Mishnah Elu Asurin ve'osrin bechol shehu yenesech v'avoda zara ve'orot levuvim. The following items are not only prohibited themselves, if they fall into something else that's permitted, the entire mixture will be prohibited. And even if the prohibited substance is just a little bit, kol shehu, even 1 in 1,000, will make the entire mixture prohibited. Number one is yayin nesech. This we know already from the previous Mishnah. But since we mentioned yayin nesech, that is oser b'mashu, we're going to mention other things that have the same law. So avoda zara. If you have an object that was used for idol worship and it's mixed together with other items that look the same, you can't tell them apart, then all of them are prohibited, even 1 in 1,000. And hides that they of an animal where they cut open the place of the heart and they rip out the heart of the animal while the animal is still alive. This was an idolatrous practice. And so the hide of that animal is prohibited, and you can tell that they did this practice by looking at the hide and seeing that there's blood dried on it and the shape of the cut that's circular. And so if one such hide that is prohibited falls into a bunch of other hides that are permitted and you can't tell them apart, then all of them are prohibited, even 1 in 1,000. And an ox that was stoned, if the ox killed someone, was involved in sin, so the ox is stoned, and that ox is prohibited to use. You cannot get any benefit from it. You can't work it. You can't eat the meat. And if so, let's say a piece of meat from that ox falls in with pieces of meat from permitted oxen, then all of them are prohibited. And the same thing with an igla arufa, when you have a murder mystery. So that heifer that is used in that ceremony that we break its neck, that is prohibited for use. If that animal becomes mixed up with other animals that look the same, then they are all prohibited. V'sipore mesora us'ar nazir ufetel chamor ubasar bechala v'sair mishtaleach v'chulin shenishhatu ba'azara hare elu asurin ve'osrin bekol shehu. And when the mesora becomes purified, he brings birds, and when he designates those birds, they are prohibited to use for anything else. If those birds get mixed up with other permitted birds, then all of them are prohibited. And the hair of a nazir, when he finishes his nizirut, he cuts his hair, and that hair has to be burnt under the korban shelamim. You put it in the fire. If that hair was not burnt and it cannot be used, and if it gets mixed up with other hair, then all of it is prohibited. And a firstborn donkey is not a kosher animal, so you can't sacrifice it. You're supposed to redeem it for money, and then if you redeem it, the donkey is permitted. But let's say you did not redeem it. Well, then the Torah says you have to va'arafto, you have to break its neck. And but let's say you didn't do that either, so you didn't redeem it, and now you have a chamor that is a firstborn. And so that cannot be used. You can't get any benefit from it. If you mix it up with a bunch of other donkeys that are permitted, then all of them become prohibited. Basar bechalav. It would seem at first reading that this would mean if milk mixes with meat. So that would mean that if a tiny bit of milk falls into a lot of meat, it would be asur bekol shehu. But that is not true. You look throughout Masechet Chulin and you see basar bechalav is min b'she'eno mino. There's two different substances, two different tastes, and it is batel, 1 in 60. Or not giving any taste. So rather what this has to mean, as Rashi clarifies, is if you have a piece of meat that mixed with, was cooked with dairy, and so now that piece of meat is prohibited. If you take that basar bechalav piece of meat that's prohibited, and that meat falls into other pieces of meat that look the same and you can't tell them apart, then even 1 in 1,000, all those pieces of meat are prohibited. So if meat and milk mix together, that is 1 in 60. But if a piece of something that was already cooked in meat and milk together and becomes prohibited, if that falls into something else, that is even 1 in 1,000. And Sa'ira Mishtaleach on Yom Kippur, these words are not found in the best manuscript of the Mishnah. the Kaufman manuscript, and it seems they do not belong here. If you read it here, that would mean that the sa'ir that we use on Yom Kippur, that we send out into the desert, if that got mixed up with other ones, then they would all be prohibited. But this is not actually, should not be included in the Mishnah. And chulin, if you take a regular animal, kosher animal, and you do shechita in the courtyard of the Bet HaMikdash. If it's a holy, sanctified animal, then it's, yes, a korban. You have to bring it and you have to do slaughtering in the courtyard. You can't do it outside. But if it's not a sanctified animal, just chulin, then the slaughter has to be outside. And if you take chulin and you slaughter it inside, it's prohibited to get benefit from it. If that meat from that animal gets mixed up with other permitted meat, then all of it is prohibited, even 1 in 1,000. So all these things, they are not only prohibited, but they prohibit other things, even 1 in 1,000. You see, this Mishnah has a nice structure. It opens the same way that it closes. But the Gemara will ask, why do we need this extra phrase? It's redundant. It must be coming to add something else. Tana, Maika Chashiv. Now wondering about this list. What did the Tana decide to include on this list? Because it doesn't include everything that is Oser Bekol Shehu. There are other things that it leaves out. So why did it include some items and leave out other items? Maybe it's including all things that are important. Something that is important is something that is counted one by one. Like a nice piece of steak, you say, here's 1 nice piece of steak, 2 nice pieces of steak. Each one is significant in and of itself. That's why you count them. You would not count grains of wheat. You never sell wheat by the grain. You sell it by an entire container full, by volume, because each one is not so important. So maybe all the things in this list are things that are significant. If so, then it should include non-kosher meat from a kosher animal that didn't get proper slaughter. That's nebela. A nebela, you're allowed to get benefit from. You can feed it to your dogs, but you cannot eat it. If a nebela falls into a whole bunch of other ones, kosher meats of the same type, then it's not batel, not 1 in 1,000. So why not include this? This is an important thing. This is something that is counted. So that can't be the criteria of the Mishnah. Oh, maybe you'll say it's only counting things that are prohibited to get benefit from. And that's why nevela is not in it, because nevela you're allowed to get benefit from, and everything on this list you cannot get benefit from. If so, how come this list does not include chametz b'Pesach? Chametz on Pesach, that's the famous one. Everybody knows the chametz on Pesach is not batel, 1 in 1,000. That's why we go crazy to check every ingredient and check under the couch and everywhere, because it's not batel at all. So how come that's not included? Because that's also isur hana'ah. Amar b'chia barabav item b'yitzchak napacha haytana tarteit le'davash minyan v'isur hana'ah. So the answer is that this Mishnah, the author of this Mishnah, wanted to include only items that have both aspects. Number one, it's counted, it's an important item. And number two, that also it's prohibited behana'ah. There are many other things that also have this aspect that they're not batel, even 1 in 1,000, but those are mentioned elsewhere. We have to limit the list only to these 2 criteria. Now we ask, well, if so, why not include the nuts from a place called Perech, very, very important nuts, and Badan, pomegranates? These are items that are significant because you count them one by one. They're very expensive. And furthermore, let's say it is prohibited because of orla. They grew in the first 3 years of a tree, and anything that's orla is prohibited even to get benefit from. And then that would include both categories. The davash minyan v'isura hana'ahu, they are counted and they're prohibited in getting hana'ah. So then those should be in this Mishnah. If that's the 2 criteria, how come these are not included? And the answer is hatina lehatam hara'ui le'orla orla hara'ui lekilakerem. Oh, because these 2 things are mentioned elsewhere in the Mishnah, in Masechet Orla. What, you don't remember? Masechet Orla says over there that which is within the category of the prohibition of Orla, if it gets mixed up in other things of the same type, then you can't tell them apart. then the whole mixture is prohibited as orla. And if some food item is prohibited as because of kila kerem, that also is prohibited to get benefit from. And if it mixes up with other produce, then the whole mixture is prohibited. So your examples would be included in that Mishnah, and therefore our Mishnah doesn't have to repeat something that's already in the Mishnah somewhere else. Then how about why not include loaves of a homeowner, homemade bread? This is something significant, even though wheat kernels are not significant. You don't count them one by one, but a fine, fancy bread is significant. And le'inyan chametz bePesach, if you have such a thing on Pesach, then that would include both criteria. It's chametz on Pesach, so it's prohibited behana'ah, and it is davar shebminyan because it's a fancy item you count one by one. How come that's not included in this Mishnah? And the answer is, Man shemat amar la Rabbi Akiva. Who did you hear say this law that such loaves would not be nullified 1 in 1,000? It's Rabbi Akiva. Oh, we have that also in Masechet Orla. In the very same Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva says also loaves of bread of a homeowner are prohibited, even 1 in 1,000. And so there you go. We have it already. The last line of the Mishnah that says, these are the items that are prohibited, and they prohibit 1 in 1,000 if it falls into something else. Why does it say this kalal at the end? What is it coming to exclude? It's saying elu, these. So it sounds like it's excluding some other things. What is it excluding? We are excluding from this list things that are important and are therefore counted one by one, but they don't have a prohibition of hana'ah. We're not mentioning those in this list. Or we are also, you can say, we are also excluding from this list things that are prohibited b'hana'ah, but they're not important. They're not davar shebeminyan, like grains of wheat. And so both of those things are not included in this list, even if they happen to also be not batel 1 in 1,000. They are not in this list, and this klal at the end is hinting to the fact that this list is not comprehensive of all prohibitions that are 1 in 1,000. Next Mishnah. If a little bit of prohibited wine falls into a cistern of permitted wine, then all of the wine is prohibited, not only to drink, but also to benefit from. That's it. All the one's gone. You can't sell it. You can't do anything with it. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omed, imacher kolo legoy, chutz midimei nesech shebo. Rashbag is more lenient, and he says, sell all of the wine in the cistern to a non-Jew and just exclude the price of the wine that fell into it. Because after all, prohibited wine fell into it. How much? 1 gallon of prohibited wine fell into it. All right, now you can't drink any of it because it's min b'mino, the whole thing is prohibited, right? Even 1 in 1,000. Fine, you can't drink any of it. But the benefit, the prohibition of benefit, really is only on the 1 gallon, the monetary value of the 1 gallon. The rest of it, why should I not be able to sell? Only 1 gallon of this whole cistern is prohibited behana'ah. And so, it's true, I can't pick it out. I don't know which one it is. But since I'm selling it, so I can take the money, and whatever it is, I'll just deduct that amount of the money, or take that amount of money, 1 gallon's worth, and throw it into the Dead Sea. So Rashbag says that's okay. Amar Rav halacha k'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, chavit bechaviyot, aval lo yain beyain. Rav says, we follow halacha like Rashbag, but that's only in a case where it's a barrel that fell into many barrels. You have 1 barrel of prohibited wine that fell into 100 barrels of permitted wine. So in that case also, like we said in the Mishnah, before, yayin beyayin, wine that falls into wine is oser b'mashu. That meant not only wine that falls into other wine, but even a barrel of prohibited wine that got mixed up with 100 or 1,000 barrels of permitted wine. All of them will be prohibited for drinking. That's true. Now how about for selling? So Tanakh Kama would say, you can't sell any of them either. You got to smash them all and dump them all out. But Rashbag says, no, you can sell all of them and then just exclude the price of 1. So Rav says that we follow Rashbag when it comes to barrels. You can take, if there's 1,000 barrels and only 1 is prohibited, sell all the barrels and then throw out the profit from one barrel. But if it's wine itself that got mixed up, that's the wine itself. It got all mixed up. So then we do not follow Rashbag. Then we follow Tanakama, and you have to throw out all of the wine. They're not separate. In the barrels, they're separate. So you can conceptually think of the money that you got as being a separate entity. That is, you price for this barrel and this barrel and this barrel. So you can throw out whatever money I made from that one barrel that's prohibited. Okay, that'll be this money, and I'm throwing it out. But if the wine itself got all mixed up, then we follow Tanakama for that. Ushmel amar afilu yain biyain. Shmuel disagrees with Rav and says we follow Rashbag 100%. Even wine that falls into wine, you can sell the whole thing and exclude just the price of the prohibited wine. V'chen amar Abba bar Chana amar Rabbi Yochanan, afilu yain b'yain. V'chen amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani amar Rabbi Chanina, afilu yain b'yain. V'chen amar Rav Nachman amar Abba bar Avu, afilu yain b'yain. All of these sages, all from Bavel, from Eretz Yisrael, also follow Shmuel to be lenient, that we can follow Rashbag in all cases. Amar Rav Nachman halacha l'maaseh, yen nesech yain b'yain asur, chavit b'chavit mutar, setam yain afilu yain beyayin mutar. Rav Nachman says, after all this, we have a lot of opinions here, and there's a difference between Rav and Shemuel. So Rav Nachman says, halacha l'maaseh, if depends, if it's yayin nesech, meaning that we know for sure that the idolater poured this wine to an idol, so it's 100% definitely prohibited. Well then, if it's the wine itself, we say prohibited, you have to throw it all out. If it's in the barrels and one barrel got mixed up with other barrels, then it's permitted. That's what Rav said, right? We follow bechavit, we can follow the leniency, but yain beyain, no, that's prohibited. So that Rav Nachman is following Rav if it's yain nesech. But if it's setam yain means this is wine that we got from a non-Jew. We don't know for sure that he poured it to an idol. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Often they do, sometimes they don't. So this is, we don't know. Most wine today is in fact setam yayin, because we don't know people that are pouring wine. Maybe in some countries they do that, but most places we don't know that they do so. So setam yayin, because you don't know that they did for sure. Maybe they didn't use it for idolatry. Then we can be more lenient, and even if it's wine that got mixed up with wine, we can follow the leniency of Rashbag and sell the whole batch, and then just take out the price of that prohibited wine that fell in the first place. Next Mishnah, Gat shel eben shezefatah goy menageba v'hi tehora. If you have a stone wine press, a wine press is like a big bathtub, and you put all the grapes in it, and you step in it to make the wine. It has a hole on the bottom so that the wine, that the grape juice will come out of it. So that's a wine press. If it's made out of stone, then generally they would line it with pitch. So if a non-Jew, you hire a non-Jew to put the lining in. Now, a typical thing that they do is when they put the lining of tar, the tar smells bad and tastes bad. So the installer would add wine onto the tar so that would deflect the bad taste of the tar. So this is a problem because here you have a non-Jew who is pouring wine onto the lining of the stone wine press. So what are you going to do? The answer is minageva. You have to clean it. A special way of cleaning it with water and ashes, thorough, deep cleansing. And that way, ash will be abrasive, like, good soap. And that will remove any wine that is stuck to the tar. But you can leave the tar there. Tar is good. You want that to be there. It makes it nice and waterproof. And then it's kosher. V'shel etz, Rabbi omer yenagev. Chachamim omrim yiklof et hazefet. If the wine press is not made out of stone, but is made out of wood, wood is more absorbent than stone. So Rabbi Yudanasi says it's the same law. You just yenagev, same as minageva. You do the deep cleansing, and you can leave the tar there. But Chachamim say no, you have to peel off that tar completely, and you put a coat on it because the wood is going to be too absorbent of the taste that was there before. If the wine press is made out of earthenware, then even if you peel off the tar, it's still prohibited, because earthenware, once it absorbs taste, it cannot be koshered. The taste will stay in there forever. There's no way to get it out. And so, because it not absorbs and you can't get it out, so you can't use it at all. There is no way to kosher a wine press that was tarred by a non-Jew who presumably added wine to it, and that wine might have been yen nesech. Amar Rava, davka zaftaha, aval darachba lo. Rava says, this Mishnah says, when is a wine press prohibited, and you have to cleanse it? Only if the non-Jew put pitch on it, put tar, because then you're going to put wine on it, and in that process it gets absorbed, so you have to clean it really well. But let's say the non-Jew did not put the tar on, a Jew put the tar on, so it's kosher. But the non-Jew did use it and trod on it. He put grapes in it and he was stepping on it. And so as he's stepping on it, right, that's a problem. He's touching it, and maybe he's lifting it, maybe with his hand, and making it prohibited. So if he trod on the grapes, then it's okay. You don't have to do anything. It's just kosher. You don't even have to do a deep cleanse. Okay, Peshita, Zafta Tenan. Now, isn't this statement of Rava obvious? The Mishnah says, Zafta, if he lined it with pitch, then you have to do deep cleansing. If he didn't line it with pitch, then there's no prohibition. We didn't say any problem with it. So why does the Mishnah have to even say this? Why does Rava have to even say this? Because I might have thought that actually the law is the same if the non-Jew stepped on grapes in it, that also you'd have to do a deep cleansing, you might have thought. And I might have thought that the Mishnah mentions zifata, that he put tar in it, because that's the typical manner. Normally, you have a new press. Okay, you get the guy. The guy is an expert. He's a non-Jew, and he comes and puts tar, and he is going to put wine in it also. So it's giving the normal case when one hires a non-Jew, and then you're going to have a problem. So this is what you have to do if that happens. Whereas the non-Jew stepping on it, that's not the typical case. But the law would be the same, in fact, if a non-Jew was stepping on grapes in this thing, that you would have to also deep clean it. That's what I might have thought. That's why Rava comes and says, no, don't think that this Mishnah is davka. Only if the non-Jew pitches it, then you have to deep clean it. If not, you don't have to deep clean it. Ika d'amre. There's another version of Rava that's exactly the opposite. Amar Rava, davka zefata, aval tarachba, la sagila beniguv. Rava says, this Mishnah is a leniency that says, specifically, if the non-Jew lined it with tar, then you can do the deep cleaning, and then it's kosher. But if the non-Jew stepped on grapes in it, then that's worse. The stepping on the grapes, that pounding, is going to get the taste really in there, and it won't be enough to do the deep cleaning. You're going to have to tear out all the tar altogether. So that's now, this one is the Chumrah. We ask Peshita, Zifata Tanan. Isn't this obvious? The Mishnah says Zifata, which means only if he tars it, then you can deep clean it. But if he didn't tar it and stepped on it, then the law would not be the same. The law would be it's no good at all. It's funny because we're asking Peshita both this way and the opposite way. But the point is, if you're making an inference from the Mishnah, well, isn't that inference obvious? Because it said zefata only. I might have thought, without Rava's statement, that the law is the same, even if he stepped on it, that you could cleanse it. And maybe it said the non-Jew pitched it because that's just a typical example. So now Rava has to say, no, the Mishnah is not giving a typical example. It's saying davka, precisely, only the case of where the non-Jew puts tar in it, that's where you can cleanse it. Because putting tar, okay, you can clean it off and you'll get the wine taste out of it. But if he stepped on grapes in it, then there's no way to kosher that. You're going to have to tear out all of the tar. And we have an example of this in the following story of a person who came to Rabbi Chia. And he told Rabbi Chia in the Bet Midrash, please send me a person who can purify my wine press. I got a wine press from a non-Jew, and it was used before. I want to kosher it. This happens a lot. You go and you buy a house, you buy an apartment, and it has a kitchen in it. So you need to kosher everything. Sometimes it's hard to do. So a regular homeowner needs some help. So sometimes you call Chabad. They come, they send over a team, they bring their blowtorches, professionals, and they will clean, kosher the whole thing. So this homeowner is asking to Bichia, this wine press owner, please send me someone. Amar le Rav, zil behadeh. So the Bichia tells his nephew, Rav, go and help him out. But see to it that I'm not going to get complaints in the study hall. In other words, do a good job. I don't want to hear complaints. I don't want to hear that you gave some leniency and a loophole, whatever. And then my colleagues in Bet Midrash are going to come and say, oh, did you see what Rav did? He permitted this and that. He shouldn't have done that. And I'm going to have to get the flack. I'm going to have to deal with the headache. Please, do a good job. Okay, Azal chaziyah dehavashi atefeh. So Rav goes and sees that the wine press is very smooth. That lining of the tar, beautiful, nice and smooth. Amar havadai benigub sagila. Because it's so smooth, it's enough just to do the cleansing, and then it'll be good. But then he was going and coming and checking more carefully. He didn't just do a surface analysis, but he checked further, and he saw a crack under his feet, and he saw that in the crack there was wine. And he says, no, it's not enough to do the deep cleansing. You have to tear out, you have to peel out all of the tar because there's cracks in it, and the wine went into the cracks. And he says, now I understand what my beloved, Habibi, another way of saying uncle. In Hebrew, uncle is Dod. Dod also means beloved, right? One relationship with uncle and nephew, people love their uncles. They take care of them. And the uncle doesn't scream at them and give them punishments like their parents do. So uncles were always beloved. And so this is what my uncle, Rabbi Chia, was saying when he said, be careful, I don't want to hear complaints, meaning go do a good job. He knew that this is a complicated situation and make sure to do a thorough job, which he did. Tenor Banan, Hagat vehamachas vehamashpech shel goyim, Rabbi matir benigur v'chachamim oserim. A Baraita teaches that a wine press and also a ladle and a funnel that was used by non-Jews for wine, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, as long as you do that deep cleansing that we spoke about in the Mishnah, then that would be permitted. Hachamim say, no, that's not sufficient. It's still not kosher. Umodeh Rabbi bekankanim shel goyim shehen asurim. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi agrees that when it comes to jugs that were used by non-Jews for wine, those are prohibited. It's not enough to do a deep cleansing of them. Now, what's the difference between a jug where the B says it's prohibited and the other items where he says it's permitted? They all have wine in them. The jug is used for permanent long-term storage, so the wine is sitting in there for a long time. It absorbs a lot. Can't get that taste out just with cleansing. Whereas these items, a ladle or even the wine press itself, you're using it just for a short time while you're making the wine and preparing it, and then you wash it out. So it's not carrying the wine for a long time. It doesn't get absorbed as much. So you can just do the deep cleaning. V'shel eitz v'shel eben yenagev. V'im hayu mezufafin asurin. And if the wine press was made out of wood or stone, then yes, you can do the deep cleaning. But if they were lined with pitch and used, then they are prohibited. So now we're going to ask on the end of it. It said that if it's made out of stone, then yenagev. But if it's with tar, then it's prohibited. So stone and tar is prohibited. It's not enough to do cleansing. That part of it seems to contradict our Mishnah. V'atanan gachel eben shezefatah goy menageba vehi tehora. Our Mishnah taught that if you have a wine press that's made out of stone that was tarred, all you have to do is do the deep cleaning and it's kosher. But here it said asurin. Matnitin de lo darachba baraita de darachba. The answer is the Mishnah is talking about a case where it was not actually used and tread upon. So you have a wine press that a non-Jew came and he put tar on it, and with the tar he puts also wine on it, but it was not used for the non-Jew did not step on grapes in it. Then it's enough to just to do the cleansing. But if Also, it had grapes that were stepped in it. That's what the Baraita is talking about when it says if it's tarred and made out of stone, then it's prohibited. Amar mor hagat v'machas mishpech shel goyim Rabbi matir beniguv hachamim oserim. Now we go back and quote the beginning of this Baraita, that a wine press and a funnel and a ladle that non-Jews use for wine, Rabbi says it's enough to do the cleansing. Chachamim say no. But that also contradicts our Mishnah, because v'hanan tenan shel cheres af al pi shekalaf et hazefet harei zo asura. If it's made out of earthenware, we're assuming that this phrase over here in the Baraita is also talking about earthenware, then even though one took off the tar, still the whole thing is prohibited. And so how could this be? The B says it's enough to cleanse it, but our Mishnah says if it's made out of earthenware, then you cannot cleanse it. It's not even enough just to peel off the tar. Amar Rava, Sefad Matitin, Atal Rabbanan. Rava explains at the end of the Mishnah, where it says that if it's made out of cheres, then it's totally no good. That's the opinion of Rabbanan, who in the Baraita said that it's osrim. So that's why it's not reconcilable with Rabbi, but is with Chachamim, which is actually quite an interesting point, that even though the Yehuda Nasi is attributed with the final redaction of the Mishnah, but a Stam Mishnah is not necessarily his opinion. And so here, the Stam Mishnah goes against Rabbi's own opinion. It follows Chachamim. Darash Rava na'ava artahu. Rava taught in public that if you have a tank of wine used by non-Jews, then you have to scald it in order to make it permitted. This will get into the laws of koshering, which we'll continue with tomorrow. Rava ki hava mishadar gulfe leharpanya. When Rava would send kegs of wine, empty kegs, to this place, Harpanya, and he'd send it with a messenger, and he wanted to make sure that the non-Jewish messenger would not put wine in it while he's traveling with it. So he wanted to send their kosher kegs, and he wanted them to stay kosher along the way. Sachif lehu apumaihu vechatim lehu abir saihu vekasabar kol davar shemachniso lekiyum afilu lefi sha'a gazru berabanan. So he would turn them upside down and seal them in sacks. So that way they're totally sealed, and you can't even put wine in it, because then you'd have to undo the sack and turn it over, and so it makes it extra difficult to use. It's possible that the non-Jew can it has to forge it and turn it over and all that. But he made it difficult for them so that it would be noticeable without a lot of effort if the non-Jew used it on the way. And he thought, even though it's in transit, so, how long does it take to walk there? It's not such a long time. But he thought he followed the opinion that anything that is made for long-term storage, even if it's used for a short time, still the rabbis made a gezerah. So yes, while a ladle and things like that, which are made to use only for a short time, those things you can cleanse. But something like a ked that's made for long-term storage, even if a non-Jew used it for a short time, while he's traveling, he wants to carry some wine with him, still it would be prohibited, and that's why he didn't just send it as is, but he sent it upside down and inside a sealed sack. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.